Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.1. Oh, excuse me, 1.1. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry about all that. Now, many of you watched at least some of my last episode here where I was wondering about the future, and I've gotten a couple of suggestions. One is to jump back, both from Nick, I believe, but to jump back to about sometime in 1942, try to puppet Burma and hold Burma or whatnot there, and then rush to the Suez via presumably taking Ceylon, the Maldives. I've wanted to have already taken that, maybe Socotra, and I guess presumably down here. Now, we have definitely found that we can't land too close up here, but it would be push into here and push for the Suez while Italy is still alive and kicking. I'm not sure that can be done, but I'm not thinking it can't be done. I guess part of it is I'm not sure if we can do it in time to save Italy. I haven't really gone back and looked. I still have all those old saves in another save folder. I can find at least something close to that. So jump back there and continuing to play from that point. And really not focusing on Australia, not focusing on India, and just push for here. You know, very much bypassing India. And so that's one suggestion. And I have been getting another sort of crazier one, is to withdraw from, you know, the Middle East here, Saudi Arabia, all of this. Just pull everything out, use the infrastructure barrier here to, I think it will fall, that if Afghanistan gets in the war, that'll collapse and they could come around here. But from this point, just withdraw all of these forces from here, use this to try to hold, you know, India, then load things up, load ships up, and gonna take a bunch of transits because we can't do it in one. Withdrawal is not so much excuse me, just starting to talk here. Withdrawal is not so much the problem. It's is to go around South Africa, and I don't know for sure whether the idea is to try to take out South Africa, but we have seen massive armies down here that we've got to hit them hard. But I think the idea is now just to bypass South Africa, but build some big sort of super transport fleets. Get a large force, basically everything here, and maybe some of the stuff from Australia. Get it to France. Okay, that's a little better. Get it to France, and then do an invasion and conquest, puppeting, whatnot, of Britain. And the thought is I have enough of a navy to defeat whatever we're going to face here. And that very well may be true. Germans, I see, have dispersed their submarines. Well, not entirely. It sees the surface raider as a type of submarine. The AI will. We still have some fleet out here. Okay, well, and take out Britain, which we're not doing it before June 44. So, but theoretically, I guess I could jump back a little ways in this series and try to do it before D-Day. And take out Britain. And maybe I could do that. Yeah, I'm mostly trying to look to see what's down here that's heading up there. Okay. Remember a discussion recently over on Slytherine's channel when I was streaming over there, which I shall generally be doing on Thursdays, about how all these games are so unrealistic, and it wasn't, weren't focusing on Hearts of Iron, but I think they were including that. Is the idea that the U.S. can be invaded, etc., etc. This wasn't about wacky alternative history settings. This was just about the idea that, oh yeah, Germany could successfully, through the war, through the game, somehow Germany can successfully invade the U.S. or Japan or whatever. And they have a point about that, and I can tell you why. At least in some of the cases, and particularly in Hearts of Iron, it's the case. If we were to accurately represent the production capabilities and the manpower capabilities of the United States, these games would be unrealistic. You go, what, gamer? If you did things realistic, it would be unrealistic? Yes, hear me out. We can see this. Look at this. Okay, this actually isn't so terrible. We have a bunch of garrison units spattered around, but and the AI doesn't know what to do with all these HQs that it's sort of accumulated here, which really the only fighting element is the armored cars. And reconnaissance, because those armor looking things are just armor HQs, and yeah, we can put them in the front line. Of course you can motorize things, and here's some more, but I'm personally somewhat troubled over, and I knew it when I was doing it, and how many people abuse my mod Third Reich events. Great mods, updated someday, because I put all those SA, you can see a little bit that Black Ice does, throughout Germany. And well, what are you going to do with what use are they? Well, part of it, quite honestly, is they look pretty on the map. I mean, that is literally part of why I did it, because they looked pretty on the map. But also another part of it is to represent, and also GGA, German game augmentation part of it, is the Wehrkrest type units, the reserve units. And those, my voice is rough today, isn't it? Good thing I'm getting this now, because it's just woke up a short while ago, but we'll be streaming live later. Did I say on Slytherine's channel? Not later, maybe from when you're watching this, but still later. On Thursdays. Okay. And those units are also done very nicely. And they're a little overpowered, but they're not terribly. And they can be put to the front line because they're meant to represent the very real reserve elements, because a bunch of the divisions that get destroyed in Stalingrad are 6 months later fighting on the front line, because they took the sort of Home Depot elements. I don't mean that as in the store, but the home wear crests or whatever elements there that had officers and men from the division back at home training up, veterans, as well as training up fresh recruits, either for that division or possibly being just generally put into the manpower pool. Hitler, and which influenced German high command, just you'd note, if liked new units for two reasons. One, it's more units on the map. Literally, he's in some ways he's playing this game. Hitler is playing this game. He, draw, instead of, I don't think they used movable counters. I think they drew the units, daily or weekly or whatever on the map, and he looked at the map. Having more units on the map without what we're seeing, I can't, right over here, you'll see over here the actual strength of the units, the sort of darker brown versus the beige, wasn't accurately represented on his map. So he sees, like there's a light armored division or armored brigade there that's at a little less than half strength. He sees just the tank unit. Now there's higher up on that list there's two medium armor units that one's at about 2/3 and the other's at 3/4. So actually they're doing fairly good strength. But if you look at the four infantry brigades, one looks like a complete shell. Just it's you also notice some medium artillery. It's a complete shell. So there's one sort of unit that's a cavalry unit that's also there. So one of these divisions here, maybe one that's retreat or something, retreating, is just completely empty of a unit. The other three of those, two are, well, one's at less than half strength, the other one's maybe at half strength, and one's at full strength. So he's not getting those kinds of information. He's just getting, there's a division, and it's supposedly combat functional. Again, like, look at that. Look at those units there. They're, there's one unit of some sort. It looks like there's a motorized transport, there's a heavy artillery, there's a command HQ to it. Some sort of heavy artillery thing that looks fully up there. Everything else is completely gutted, plus some air units. Yeah, and so so this looks like it's something, but it's nothing. And so Hitler liked more units on the map, so fresh recruits were being put into additional units as opposed to bringing veteran units up to strength. The main reason the units that were recreated out here was, well, one, they would be taken off the map permanently if they weren't there, so it's not strengthening those units, and two, it was for propaganda purposes to try to make it seem to the German public that, I don't know, the 13th Panzer Division, God, I don't know the Panzer divisions that died at Stalingrad, but, pick the unit. It still exists. It's still fighting. It's still being mentioned in the newspapers. It's being, after being reinforced, it's back on the Eastern Front, for propaganda purposes and that type of thing, and both to their home front as well as to the enemies. The other reason was the National Socialism spirit. The younger men who had been in the Hitler Youth, at least for some years, and they were much more national socialized than the older men. And defeatism, they've been at home, yeah, they've seen the bombings, and it's so terrible, and they're so enraged to fight the Allies, and they're believing that the Fuhrer is going to win, so they don't have defeatism. They've got the propaganda, and they're going out. Where the division that's been on the front lines or in, in the fight since the beginning, and half the men or more are veterans from, you know, the beginning of the war with the Soviet Union. You get the young recruits in there, you'll get, shall we say, realism about what's going on, and which Hitler will talk about as defeatism. You know, so those are sort of the two main reasons why Hitler and his army put forward was more units. So that's, you know, so in the home front, and you have these units. Now, some of the units that for the event change for Third Reich events that deal with some of these reserve units go through a change. They get pulled from the map and get put back on the map as they get updated, because they are eventually moved to the front lines. Because eventually ultimately the front lines move to them, but some of them are, you know, moved into. Well, some of them are moved as sort of occupational units instead of being sort of in their home recruiting area. They are stationed in, you know, the Netherlands and France, or in, you know, sort of Poland. Not so much anti-partisan East fronts, but sort of Poland sort of areas. And just, you know, trained up and training recruits there. But also particularly post D-Day and with the collapse of Italy, you see a lot of these reserve units now being moved to frontline activities. So only on, in essence, the collapse of German armies, which obviously we have the collapse of a German army. Stalingrad, we have the collapse of Panzer Army Africa. In North Africa, we have, I don't presume it's an army level, you know, multiple corps or something, collapse of the German army and the Italian army down in Sicily and retreating up into Italy, which, you know, then Italy changes sides. Don't know if you would quite call, well, Falaise, post-Falaise pocket. Yeah, you sort of see the collapse of the German army in this part of France. So you're seeing collapses of the German army, and, you know, oh shit, now what? And that's what they're meant to be used for. I mean, I truly mean for them to be used. The SA units, yeah, I have some photos definitely of SA men, are mostly just would be not used, though, so much under their. There's a lot of mystery on the SA. I got a book that was on the SA, and looking forward to hearing about it. But in many ways, it stops. You know, going after, you know, the war starts. But well, that's some of the most. Yeah, there's some more research there, but it stops on a lot of their operational activities. Talking about more some of their leaders and other political stuff going on. But in, shall we say, popular culture and popular history, the SS take over as a predominant force. But the I would say the SA, and I don't mean SA men because they were still SA men that were in the army for, you know, number of years fighting on the front in some military, and I'm not talking about those guys, but the guys sort of at home, the SA men, I think they outnumbered the SS men at the end of the war. Now, these are, like one case, an example, I know, this is probably going to end up being labeled a special episode, of one SA man who was from an SA unit, I think in Western Germany, but he transfers, and the reason I know about this is because I didn't buy it or anything, but was up for sale, his sort of documents post-war, and I saved the information about that they were for sale, and photographs of them for possible use in an event, but as part digging into my research on it, one SA man was his job and fairly young man, not super young, but not super old, but definitely a military age. He is transferred or gets a job. Well, he gets a job to running an arms factory in Greater Warsaw, in basically Warsaw area. Warsaw is a devastated city, by the way, but the Germans may have thought about erasing at some point, though more post-war than they weren't trying to rebuild it so much. And they did pull out a lot of arms development elements back to Germany, ICs, if you in this game terms, but they did keep some of the arms factories working that the Poles had, and this German was transferred over there. I think most of the workers were Polish in the factory, but German oversight, and he was transferred over there. So he transfers his SA unit membership, what unit he's a member of. Now, he doesn't transfer his membership in the SA, but his unit, he transfers from that unit to a new Sturmbahn that has been formed in Warsaw, made up primarily of Germans who've come to Warsaw, and maybe a few sort of ethnic Germans that, because there had been ethnic Germans living in Warsaw and Germany, many in what this area that's, fully gray now, but there were others. So Germans, people living in Poland of one way or another, Germans considered ethnically German. Since they didn't have DNA tests, how can you tell? But whatever. So I know that they set up this SA unit. I don't know whatever Sturmbahn or whatever level that this theoretical numerical size, because I've tried to research some of these things, is the actual size is very elastic. Sometimes they were much larger, than the unit would normally be, a number of men for that size of unit. Sometimes they're much smaller, and especially once the war starts. So that's why I actually reduced the strength of all those SA units, representing all of the men. The units are still there and actually grow after the war starts, because new units grow in Poland, new units grow in other recently occupied territories. So it's actually growing. The SA is growing, and so we know that this guy is of military age and is military physically fit enough to be in the military, but he is working in an arms factory, which is a protected and very necessary job, and he's an SA member in good standing and presumably continuing the SA revolt risk, but also pointing to the rifle armed element as a sort of anti-partisan. One of my research helpers, when she was doing, and yes, the main editor for Third Reich Events was a she. Say was because no longer active, but they would be, this is also great, the last guy from The Great Escape, not the movie, the actual escape plan has just died. For whether downed pilots, because you see the airplane fight, come down, or escaped prisoners of war, when those kind of things happen, they call out the SA as one of the elements. Of course, they also call out the reserve army elements, and a lot of those other elements get called out, temporarily to hunt for these people, and then they go back to. So there's this whole militia element in Germany with the SA. There's the whole reserve army element. Both players and trust me, I'm sort of getting to my point. I know this is a long time getting there. But the AI and players will abuse the system. I tend not to. Because I want to play sort of historically, and it's the idea is theoretically I got this big SA and some reserve units that, oops, there's an invasion in the Netherlands. Well, what am I going to do? Well, grab up some of these garrison units, grab up the SA, grab up the reserve elements, and rush them to the front line and try to contain the invasion. Because if it's a, you know, a not just a 2 or 3 division, let's just see if we can get ashore. And see here we have an SS army unit guarding Bruges. It's in fully good shape, and this is just, you know, when we saw hollowed out units there, and a heavy SS battalion, tanks and armor. That's still a rather effective unit, but probably best to actually be more directly attached to. Now this is correct here. Sticking a SD and militia in here to both protect the coast and here to protect the coast. You know, not so much coast, but reduce revolt risk. Artillery unit. Sturm, I think he's actually a good general. Oh, I know why this, because there's only 1 unit here. This is probably a remainder unit. Yeah, that's what's happened. This is what happens from presumably bad modding, I hope not mine, in which the remove units, and you have to give the exact name, and if somehow they've just missed the name by just a teeniest little bit, it'll leave a remainder, like an artillery unit in this case. Leave an artillery unit here, and leave the general still there in command of a single unit, which he shouldn't be, and the artillery unit shouldn't be there. When you've dropped on the map, you know, the upgraded unit, and that's probably what's happened. So this is sort of that, and of course the AI does not recombine units. So that's why I'm not too upset that this isn't combined with, I'm not really upset at all that this isn't combined with a better unit, but, and this alone, fighting against any serious opposition isn't going to do very well. But you put it in a stack of 3 or 4 other divisions, and just the idea of heavy armor, which is harder to pierce and maybe very likely piercing the enemy armor, and some artillery effects can be very effective, you know, when just added, you know, stacked with some other units. So that in itself is a bit weaker without a, you know, an HQ and a little bit more to turn it into a little stronger conf group, which is normally what I try to do with those. And of course, here's a nice SS mountain unit. Yeah. So if we modeled Germany like I do, and I intend Third Reich events, and I think GGA is also intended for the human player, and if the humans want to abuse the system, they're free to play the game the way, wherever they want to play the game. They are not intended to be done for the AI. Okay, so that sort of gets that. So if we were to sort of make America what America was, or even to some degree, but maybe less so, Britain, you know, with the Home Guard and some of that stuff, you'll start seeing Home Guard units being thrown into North Africa or something. And that is the problem. And so once you get off script from World War II, this becomes very difficult. And that, trust me, I'm actually getting to the point that I started with on this thing. I'm just taking a very long way there, and I've given up on the idea that this episode is going to be a game-playing episode, and it'll be labeled as such. Which turns some people off, but yeah, I'm going to make these, and I'm happy to label them so somebody isn't watching, waiting for the game to start, and when is he going to get done talking? Well, he'll know from the start that I won't get done talking, and I won't do that. And so I do, and I just got feedback the other day, you know, a day or so ago, about balancing out between my talking and gameplay. But sometimes it's just going to be a complete talking episode, but it'll be labeled so you can skip it or start it and jump through it just to see if the talk is of interest to you, and if not, go away. Fine. Not from the channel, but from this episode, you know, come back next episode and continue the thing. So if we go off script, then we see abuses. So we see the almost, and I would say it's almost, collapse of the Soviet Union. So we can have a lot of, you know, conscript units magically appear onto the map sort of representing, the sort of rush call-up of units there that only happen and would have only happened under certain conditions. Would not have happened if the fighting was started by the Soviets and it's sort of hovering around, this sort of area kind of thing. And Stalin would have kept those men working in the factories or in the fields growing food to keep the war fighting going on, and would have gone through this sort of normal process to create, the rest of the regular Soviet army. And so that works. And so either, and I don't know how they're scripted, whether it has to be after a Barbarossa, German declaration of war, and or, which I know some of them are triggered as you get to certain points. One place to maybe avoid is Narva and push up here to try to get to Leningrad before or just as the scripted units show up here, so they have no organization, so you can hit them before they're organized and shatter them, which I've done. So just a game playing tip. And I'm ambivalent, as you can tell, to some degree about some of these scripted units appearing. But yeah, it's on script. It's what sort of happens, whether exactly or just, well, we're representing it because if we either boosted the IC and or manpower of the Soviet Union, we'll either see big stacks of units getting ready to invade Germany, or they'll have big stack of units sitting over here ready to defend against or invade China, and it won't help. Because that's part of this, quite honestly, is because over manning of some of these other borders by magically appearing at reasonably timed moments, units in this area instead of this, because by that time often the Soviet Union trying to withdraw units from other parts of the country, but they're just way far away to get there in time. So it's sort of, some of it is overcoming the AI. So that, in Germany, sort of, oh, I was going to say, most of the SA units that you see towards the end of the war are not really there anymore. They are, but they're not functionally as military units on the map. They'd be the 105th Volkssturm Division, 2nd Battalion, and they would be, and partially for ideological reasons and beliefs, they'd be intermixing the SA personnel that they hope is die hard, literally, and ideologically sound, mixed with the just, your average factory worker and World War I veteran or whatever that's been pulled out of their, other sorts of jobs in life and are being sent to the front. So instead of just having like an SA Sturmband standing next to a unit, standing next to a DAF unit, the Deutsches Arbeitersfront, or some sort of workers unit that may not be or the personnel. I mean, the organization was ideological, but the personnel weren't necessarily, and holding different positions on the front line. Some of them may run away quicker, they think, so they sort of intermix it. And they just call them Volkssturm. So you sort of do see, and there are some events, I think, to create some of the Volkssturm. So you do see these SA-type units fighting at the end of the war, sometimes in their brown uniforms with armbands that say, I'm in the, Volkssturm or whatever. And so they do end up on the front lines, but only at the collapse of it. So if we were to represent similar sorts of things going on, like all the manpower and units in the coastal artillery. Now I do have an event at Third Reich Events that adds these guys, coastal forts, not units, no units on the map, but coastal forts. But if we were to add the sort of heavy artillery unit, both, and we'll give a little plug for Strategic Command, they have an immobile unit. Doesn't go anywhere, and like one of them appears somewhere up in here in their hex system that can, shoot as an artillery unit. So you can't move it anywhere. It's just here, but it actually and not just a fort that that another unit occupies. It's actually a combat unit. I would love that type of stuff, so that I could have a a coastal artillery unit show up here. Now their coastal artillery unit can actually shoot at stuff at sea. Now, of course, their sea zones are much smaller. Their hexes, same size as a land province, but to actually sort of have something that you can't move and becomes, and if you disband it, you don't. It's not worth to disband, really. I'm not even sure if you can disband units in that game. Don't know that you can. Not that there would be a real reason why to, because there isn't sort of an equipment or manpower element. But and if I had an immobile artillery unit of some sort, I very well may have done some more. But the U.S. also had mobile or semi-mobile coastal artillery units and anti-aircraft artillery units. And by mobile, I don't know that they're like, fully motorized and trucked up and ready to go, but they're not, guns and placed in concrete bunkers that you have to demolish almost the concrete bunker to get the gun out. And, I'm talking something that can strategically be redeployed. And those are on the east and west coast, places like Panama, and they grow. Before the war and after the war has started, after in 42, they get larger and there's more of them. So if you were to represent all of the military might in America, but in this game allow it to be deployed overseas, you then, because unrealistically, because there's a lot of training divisions, there's a lot of units. The U.S. decided at some point fairly early that they were only going to do 100 divisions. Not that they couldn't do more. In either production of equipment or production of the units, but they figured 100 divisions, at least for the overseas army. A bunch of National Guard, because they're pre-existing units, get activated and they don't deployed overseas. But it's more the 100 divisions is what they think they can support effectively, and it's a fairly round number. Overseas, with shipping, shipping the ammo, shipping the food, all of that kind of stuff, whether to Europe or the Pacific Theater. So that is sort of an arbitrary self-limitation. And I'm sure that they would have gone over that had, them been losing, if they had been losing. That would have been a different matter. And even that, they may have lost some divisions, so they would not maybe go over the 100 divisions. They would just be making replacement divisions. So if we were to do it too realistic, unless you really script the AI, which it could be done, or you somehow are able to, I don't know, revolt risk effects or something by people dissatisfied with the lack of home garrisons for the army in Louisiana or in Oklahoma, right here. I think this is Oklahoma City. Yep, Oklahoma City. In the state of Oklahoma, if you don't know. There are, I at least were in the 80s and 90s. Some of them may have been shut down. Naval bases in Oklahoma. United States naval bases. My dad used to go to one periodically. California, but for his job. Now these were weapon storage bases. And they were sort of centrally located to move weapons to either coast. So obviously no ships. Just recently got a one of these more central bases was with the major naval air station for naval pilot training. So there's a Navy base way inland. Massive naval air training bases way inland, and I don't know if that base is still there or not. So yes, the U.S. has, plus of course Army bases, but somehow go, well, you're not, protecting us well enough, so the people are rioting for, demanding protection. Revolt risk goes up, factory output goes down, or something, without necessarily like creating a partisan unit, but just the idea to sort of force players to keep units at home, whether they're being successful or not overseas, because, of course, the greatest priority of the United States Armed Forces is to protect the United States. So, so if we lose all of our expeditionary armies, we should still have an army at home to rebuild, to, continue the fight. And so that sort of thing. So the unrealism of Germany, of my German conquests here, are incredible. It just isn't going to happen. One, we could argue with a better AI, Germany wouldn't be able to get that far, because even if we were to take England, the U.S. would be moving divisions somewhere up here to re-invade, would be possibly get, which they did historically, grab the Azores from Portugal without Portuguese consent, though the Portuguese didn't fight, and then re-invading North Africa, or who knows, even invading the Iberian Peninsula. And so the U.S. would have been much more aggressive. So that's one unrealism element of it. The other is, even if somehow I've defeated those kinds of things, it's going to be serious naval actions and air actions that probably are never going to let me get across the ocean, no matter what's going on, no matter what I build, because they would always be able to build more and better. So yeah, even with the fall of the Soviet Union. So that unrealism element, and this is where I'm getting to when I was starting some of this, is in these games, okay? Unrealistic outcomes. And so, and part of that we will come to is the term that this is a game and not a simulation. Now, you can have two types of simulation. One that just purely simulates what happened in World War II. So the outcome is always the same. Because it's just, you're just watching a demonstration of what happened in real life. The other sort of simulation is like a, it'll allow you, shall we say, tactical freedom, in the sense of where to send your carriers, where to do your invasions, that kind of thing. But you're stuck to production levels of World War II, or perceived production levels, because, well, what if within the simulation, what if Germany very early on moved more air units back to Germany and from the various fronts, and defeated the bombing campaign, so you had higher levels of production just from the lack of bombing. But so if we were to stay with a simulation game of World War II, Sea Lion, if ever attempted, always loses, because there is general consensus that no matter what Germany was going to do, from the fall of France until the end of 41, obviously middle of 41 they invade the Soviet Union, but whatever they could have, even if they had not, if they stayed away from going to war and preparing for war with the Soviet Union, even if they did whatever preparations up until the end of 41, in no way could Germany successfully invade. Not that they couldn't get a few troops across the English Channel, because as by you're getting more and more into 41, you have a rearmed Britain. No way is a Sea Lion ever going to be successful, and it just won't be. And after 42, if the US is in the war because Japan does something or whatever, it's just never successful. So we as players of this game don't want a hard simulation of those World War II. We want a realistic game, which is still which is that, and it's quite realistic that Japan could have invade Australia. It's just a combination of the Australian Armed Forces, or the Anzac Forces. Don't want to forget New Zealand, but and some of the Commonwealth units, And the U.S., that they stopped them here, to stop the Japanese here. Had they not stopped them there, I am sure that there would have been some sort of, because this northern part of Australia is very underpopulated, some sort of invasion. And I have no idea how successful it would or wouldn't have been at the time, but I can't imagine them not being able to successfully land a significant force. Now, could it do much more than get out of the port area? The city and region, and just sort of be like, yeah, we've made it ashore, we defeated the local unit, we're holding out here, you're bringing in supplies, we're fine. That doesn't mean that they're then able to, rampage across Australia. Maybe they could have. I don't know, quite honestly. I think Australia was under-equipped and had nowhere near the army that we were facing down here. Again, that's also some of the unrealism of this game. So, some of this is what we're doing is realistically. What, up to the defeat of the Soviet Union, and then maybe, a post-Soviet defeat, Sea Lion, Germany, I could see that happening. The German army is much better equipped. You just have to, better than we normally do, develop a protection force and air force and go after them, especially if Germany is also holding the Mediterranean secure. And it's why after the fall of Britain, my German series, my viewership goes down, because I think partially because the unrealism, partially also the challenges sort of realizes gone from the game. There's still challenge in this game, absolutely in this game, because we're facing right now, at best, if something doesn't change, a stalemate. That is a victory in a sense, in that I wasn't defeated in the Pacific or in China, for sure, but it isn't, ultimate victory. Just thinking of what I'm going to call this. I don't know what this episode, but so unrealism in this game, sort of where I was going. I think it is unrealistic, just effing unrealistic, that if we have, let's just say we have this world situation at the moment. Allies control Sicily, Allies control North Africa, Allies control the Levant here, which is sort of the coastal, does sort of extend in a bit, but sort of the coastal regions here. And so if they control that, and somehow the Japanese and other allied Iraqi, Saudi, Yemeni, then they would have found some Arab units. I don't know how strong, but they would have found them. Definitely not with Polish volunteers, as we see retreating there. But they would have had some allies here. So even if, say, this is a historical situation, just go with me for the moment, that this is something that could have happened historically. That somehow Japan is able to occupy all of this of India. Yes, I know my friend Azads might think that there would be lots and lots of Indian volunteers, and there may be, rising up to help them maintain the peace and unify India under a new government that was going to be allied with Japan, and eventually, an ally of Japan, and independent, well, semi-autonomous. I don't even think Azad thinks. Maybe he just thinks that the reality would be that they wouldn't. It wouldn't be a puppet, but if we look at Japan everywhere else, it's a puppet situation. But they'd be just big enough trouble that Indian nationalism would burn bright, and that they might be grateful to their Japanese allies and remain a strong ally, but govern themselves internally and to a very limited extent externally. He may think that, but I have my doubts. But let's say that this is the situation. There is still no realistic way in my mind that I can justify. Now, I can justify that if Japan gets India and Japan gets some of these islands, that Japan, and there was worry, and mostly it was Japan's. I mean, why? You know, why would we want to base, a submarine base in Vichy-occupied Madagascar? Why? There's no fleet to go out there and sink. Our submarines are out to go sink a fleet. Oh, those are just merchant vessels. They don't mean that much. No problem. If we need to, we'll move our whole big fleet in and sink a British fleet in the Indian Ocean or something. Yeah, we'll do that. But why would we even want a open or secret submarine base kind of thing? And base doesn't necessarily need to be the underground bunker that the submarine pen type thing. Could just simply mean a some obscure bay or port or whatever that a ship moves into that's French flagged, that has supplies, fuel, food, maybe even torpedoes or something on board that they transfer out of the, away from curious eyes that are going to report it, and just so that refuel, mainly just refuel and refood and whatnot submarines out here to operate secretly. Could have just been a secret base, minimal like that, to a full blown sailing into whatever major port with the Japanese flag flying on the submarine. Don't know what extent that it might have been, but that's okay. We're I like I say, it's somewhat out of Japan's idea for a secret base, but not if you look at their propaganda and their view of themselves. The idea that they are going to come to battle the evil imperialists in Africa or Arabia. That this element, the size and scale, this is a bit ridiculous. But the idea that once they've sort of wrapped this up and realized they can't go here, I could see them, though they might be pressured a bit more by Germany to go after the Soviet Union instead. Now, I've explained to me in the game terms to you why I think we're actually being more effective not in the war than in it. But had we really seen all of these, what is this, 2 armored divisions, 5 or 6 with heavy tanks here, and up here 8 armored divisions at least. Okay, 8 armored divisions. 5 armored divisions, or brigades, because these may not have all the supporting elements. 5 armored divisions or brigades, 2 heavy with a bunch of conscript units, 5 more. Okay, these are all brigades because there's no real infantry there. It doesn't quite, and there's no headquarters, so it doesn't quite get the combined arms bonus. But 3 heavy, 5 medium, and an infantry tank 1, and yeah. So yeah, all that would obviously be out on the Eastern Front if there was a human player, and whatever real life kind of things, if those existed, they would be all out on the Eastern Front, and you might see a thin smattering of light armor units like these out here. They're just sort of like hanging on, just sort of around with a bunch of conscript units. And it's really only the the idea that in 45 that the Soviets, or in 44 that Kursk is happening and whatnot, that they're pushing. Kursk is before that, but they're pushing into Germany effectively, that Stalin is sort of getting ready to act around in this region. Obviously, he doesn't have to act all over here, but had this been a little bit more real life, and we've got India, this border is probably pretty protected, and realized, of course, that was a bit more in Soviet possession. But we could definitely at that point see the usefulness of a Japanese aggression here, because like when we've watched, me take Moscow and take Stalingrad, we have taken Leningrad here, and pushing on there, yeah, taking out the Soviets here would have been a useful maneuver. And especially if we see the Soviets fall and India is in Japanese hands. The real likelihood of Japanese adventurism in parts of Africa, whether they wanted to stay or not, I don't know, but just as to fight the enemy in its colonial home, in its colonial regions, that to me seems somewhat realistic. What just doesn't, even at this stage, seem realistic is moving the great bulk of the Japanese army and the great bulk of the Japanese fleet to the Channel region, or maybe come out of the Bay of Biscay and come around and invade into here. This seems entirely unrealistic, entirely fantastical, fantasy. Now, in the sort of winning the game, winning the game of Risk, or winning whatever, and brilliant generalship that I'm able to defeat the AI. Well, I think we've sort of demonstrated that I can defeat the AI. I can outthink the AI. I can outthink the AI here. It's just I'm outclassed by Marine units and overly buffed, armored divisions of the Desert Rats here and some of these other units that were specifically made to make it so that the Italians do not defeat the British, because again, the Italian AI player will move more units to North Africa than what could have been supported in real life, than that Italy would have been willing to do. So they're trying to simulate what's going on here by over strengthening certain British units. And that's sort of what we're fighting here, some partially. And so maybe the great number of viewers think that, okay, this is just, at this point, just a game. Let's play the game to win. Let's see if we can do the, checkmate move of taking the, I don't know if it's the king or the queen. The queen, I guess, is sort of the better moving player. The king is ultimate victory, so I don't know. The U.S. is probably both the king and the queen here at this point. But take whatever piece off the board of Britain out that then changes the game. That then, once you get Britain, probably Nick or Jeff or whoever, well, why don't you, now that you've taken Britain out, why don't you, go after Gibraltar, or just, invade, North Africa here and get that, and whatnot. Now that you've done that, and by cutting off here, you're trying to cut off supply to all these other places, and why not, and yeah, maybe from this Japanese standpoint, maybe because Germany has shown that they can hold here. At least 19 divisions, no, 20. At least 20 divisions are here. Oh, plus the Italian, so looking at the headquarters, there's 4 Italian divisions in this stack. I see the headquarters flags. So yeah, of one type or another, plus some here, and some more here. Windhound is down here. Now, the good German divisions, though, of course, we see a couple that are just gutted down here. Some element of the Hermann Goering is down here. Good elements back here aren't wasted there. It's not like sticking them in a port on, yeah. A few good divisions out here isn't entirely wasted, but still, I would be moving the junky divisions away and, the trash divisions away and setting them over here and swapping them out. But that's another thing. So yeah, maybe we could have a an Axis victory at least in Europe, because once I take that and take down North Africa and kill all these units here, maybe it would be time to you know, happy fun time to invade the Soviet Union. I don't know, but hence the few of you are still here. And I was recently suggested by Florian that, hey, who wants to see me play, you know, Black Ice 10 with Germany, and that's very likely to come. But with an emphasis on, you know, Plan Z, the Z plan, the Z plan, you know, which is naval buildup. And I wrote back fairly long, and not trying to shoot down his whole idea, but trying to go, well, what's the story behind this? How is that going to be a thing? Just simply build more ships? Well, I've shown how to defeat Britain without building any more ships. I can, you know, take down Britain with partially because of the AI, partially just because I wait long enough that I have a fairly good paratrooper army. And so defeating Britain is not needed to have more ships. So what's the, you know, the sort of, in short, what's the story behind it? Now, my other German series is, the story would be how I, if I was being Germany, how would I win the war? Defeat Poland, defeat France, secure the Mediterranean, then defeat the Soviet Union. Okay, that's the story. Beyond that, okay, well then, well, once you defeat the Soviet Union, well then, since you're still alive and you have a big, super strong army, let's take out Britain. Okay. And then from there, it really becomes much more fantasy stuff. It's just me trying to, you know, island hop through South America, island hop through the North Atlantic to come in and crush America. And by that time, the series is even doing worse views than even this one is, but the people just lose interest. Either it's taking a long time getting to the you know, the good bits, you know, invading New York City, just, you know, all the island hopping, and so they wander off and don't hang around for it. Or it's like, hey, we know gamers won, what's the point of watching? And the viewership is 1/4 or less of what the viewership is start of Barbarossa. So, you know, in the middle of the series, you know, we've already been fighting a lot, talking a lot about the, you know, the peacetime, going through all that stuff. People been hanging with me through all that stuff, and it normally spikes up at Barbarossa again. You know, large viewership, and it's 1/4 of that when I'm defeating America. And that's sort of what I'm thinking is happening here. I had intended to play this episode, and maybe you could tell at the start, because I really want to see if I take this army here. We can scroll up and scroll down, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, okay, take that army. It's not too huge. Maybe it's not as big as I'm thinking. But take this army and add it to, though it's been pointed out, it doesn't have a lot of AT, but it does have some AT. A lot of the landing divisions don't. Like, that doesn't specifically have an AT element, but it does have the support units. This does have AT, so a bunch of them have AT. Not a lot, where a lot of the units that we're fighting are marine units without significant armor. These amphibious army units, I think, are going to have light enough armor that the this mixed support does have heart attack of 10 and piercing of 18. Let's just, for the fun of it, let's see, I have a pure anti-tank unit, heart attack of 38 instead of 10, and piercing attack of 38 instead of 18. So obviously a lot more piercing. So this is probably adequate to deal with most medium armor types that we may be facing. But as you can see here, there ain't that we can, and I think we have full records here. There isn't any. There's light armor or amphibious armor, which is generally sort of light here. So I think our okay, here are 2 armored units, 2 armored divisions here, you know, brigades. Those will be serious, so those would need. So and up here 1. So I did think and thought that, and we are facing some, and I knew the British, we had armor, British armor here, North Africa, you know, part of the 8th Army type units. So I knew we had those, but we're being defeated in part by infantry divisions and U.S. Marine divisions. Infantry tanks, those could be fairly thick. I think the armor, well, some of the armors are mine. It's light. It's running away with that. There, some regular armor, but some regular armor, I think, and we have some heavy anti-tank units. Are they still here? No, they're already being shipped. Well, we have some of the divisions in building up here that are almost ready. Here have heavy AT units, so they'll do better. So I am curious about if I could, you know, sort of push up here, take the 2 ports, cut all this off, and sort of starve it out. And presumably, if we've done that, we've dealt with a lot of their combat units, and secure the you know, the Suez and these ports to allow the Japanese Navy in here. But I guess some of my question is how unrealistic. And I want Nick and Jeff. I love you guys. You know, you don't know how much I love people who post on these videos, and you know, I also love the guys who post so much and come onto the live streams, and I just presume, just, you know, for the live stream isn't good for Jeff or Nick's time, you know, what, working in life and whatnot, and that's fine, or others. But you guys who post all the time, or even you guys just post occasionally, I love it even when you say hi. Partially just notice that you've made it and you care. That's nice. And partially it helps out the YouTube algorithm. So any sort of posting is welcome, really. But love to hear what your thoughts are. And yeah, this has gone on long enough. Trying to think. Okay, well, like the video if you would. If you want to dislike it, fine, but tell me why, please. Tell me why. So see you next time. We will be continuing this for at least a little while. Want your ideas on whether to jump back in time a little bit, a long ways, or try to go from here to C, and yeah, I guess that's it. Covered a lot of topics here, and I hope they're of interest, and hope it's entertaining. So thanks so much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.